Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and oh boy, Eminem album bomb, and this, it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. You know, I flew back home yesterday from Chicago and Pitchfork Festival. It was an absolute blast. I'm probably going to make a video about it on my main channel. But man, it's exhausting to be on your feet for a 3-day festival, plus travel days, filming, and associated tomfoolery. And I was actually a little bit enthused to discover that apparently Billboard had delays that would push the charts back until tomorrow. Just a little bit more of a breather. Turns out I'm not that lucky, as it was just delayed until midday rather than first thing in the morning. It's an Eminem album bomb week, thankfully a big enough one to be handled as I've already reviewed the album. It fits under the rules. Shame it's not better, or really that good, but I haven't expected consistent quality for him going on a decade. It just means this video is going to wind up getting late by the time it finally gets out. But before we get into all that, let's start off with our top 10, where, okay, I'm legit surprised that a bar song Tipsy by Shaboozey is back at number 1. Although I really shouldn't be, given that the song has consistent strength in every channel, a benefit on the margins that most don't otherwise have. Compare this to I Had Some Help by Post Malone and Morgan Wallen at number 2, which does have the edge on the radio, but lags on both streaming and sales. Or Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar falling back to number 3 after the video cooled down a little. It still dominates streaming, but less so on sales, and the radio margin isn't shrinking anytime soon. There's just a lot there. And at this point, it's really just a horse race between those three, because Million Dollar Baby by Tommy Richmond at number 4, I mean, the radio growth, the streams, they're good, just not good enough to get that close. And Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter at number 5, it might have peaked on the radio and streaming took a downswing. And that might clear room for Please 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 by Sabrina Carpenter at number 6, which does have better streaming, but it needs to pick up a lot of radio to fill in the gaps to go any higher. Then we saw a nice little boost for Too Sweet by Hozier at number 7. I'm chalking that up to largely stable, if peaking radio, and Lose Control by Teddy Swims jumping up to number 8, which actually saw a nice little radio and streaming second wind, though it does trail in the former on the margins, and it was just barely enough to get over Beautiful Things by Benson Boone at number 9, and that's just more in a consistent downswing. Finally, thanks to said album bomb, we got Houdini by Eminem now back at number 10. The radio has actually been a little bit slower to get on board than expected, but the streaming boost is gonna get it this high, at least for now, and at least for 1 week. Now that naturally takes us to our losers and our dropouts, and there wasn't exactly that many in the latter category. The biggest probably being End of Beginning by Dijo, that comfortably will get its year-end list spot for 2024, where Down Bad by Taylor Swift and Wine Into Whiskey by Tucker Wetmore might wind up being closer or just outright missing it. But Eminem did trigger enough wide-ranging Hot 100 impact to give us a lot of losers, so let's start off with the remains of Zach Bryan's album bomb. American Nights at 57, Better Days with John Mayer at 84, Oak Island at 95, Bass Boat at 96, and Sandpaper with Bruce Springsteen at 100. And you know, while we're on debuts, Tough by Quavo and Lana Del Rey skidded down to 60. Then we got a couple continued losers, notably Sexy Red with Get It Sexy at 70, and You My Everything with Drake at 87, but also for Kid Laroi with Girls going at 95, taking Nights Like This down to 71 with them, as well as The Boy's Mind by Ariana Grande slipping down to 82, alongside We Can't Be Friends, Wait for Your Love at 35, though that last one will likely clinch a year-end list spot. Now on that note, there are a couple bigger songs taking a dive here. Lovin' On Me by Jack Harlow at 48, yes, it's still around. Yeah Glow by Glorilla at 50, Gotta Only by Floyd Menor and Chris MJ at 53, and Euphoria by Kendrick Lamar at 75, as well as cuts like Dirt Cheap by Cody Johnson at 61, and Band for Band by Central Cee and Lil Baby at 64. Finally, okay, let's work our way down from the top. Whiskey Whiskey by Moneybagg Yo and Morgan Wallen at 42, I Am Not Okay by Jelly Roll at 46, TGIF by Glorilla at 47, not the best week for her unfortunately. You Look Like You Love Me by Ella Langley and Riley Green at 52, Devil Is a Lie by Tommy Richmond at 58, Red Wine Supernova by Chappell Roan at 65, We Ride by Brian Martin at 79, Nasty by Tinashe at 80, I Think I'm in Love With You by Chris Stapleton and Dua Lipa at 97, and Sweet Dreams by Co Wetzel at 99. So okay, What about gains and returns? Well, there are no returns. The only gain we got is I Can Do It With a Broken Heart by Taylor Swift getting pushed as that next single to 43. That's not surprising, even though I think it's the very safe choice. Florida is right there, Taylor. You're too big to fail. You could easily do it. But again, we are in absolutely album bomb territory. Big enough I only need to talk about the best, worst, or in the top 20 with this album, thank God for small blessings. But outside of those, Head Honcho with Easy Mill at 72, Bad One with White Gold at 69, Temporary with Skylar Grey at 56, Antichrist at 39, Lucifer with Sly Pyper at 37, Trouble at 31, Evil at 30, Somebody Save Me with Jelly Roll at 27, and Brand New Dance at 25. The fact that the last encore leftover did not qualify the worst here, that speaks volumes. But thankfully, we're not starting off with Eminem and our new arrivals. Number 91, Indifferent by Megan Moroney.
The truth is I couldn't guess how sweet it is to be so indifferent.
On the topic of recent albums that I really need to get to at some point, schedule's bad right now, folks, I've been paying attention to how Megan Moroney's been seeing some mostly consistent breakthrough success, and I was curious how this promotional single would perform, and honestly, it's kind of okay. The sort of post-breakup song where she so effectively processed the heartbreak, she doesn't even need to be reminded of it. She just feels nothing beyond mild irritation and indifference. But I'm not sure the execution really matches that all that well. The song that immediately came to my mind was I Forgot That You Existed from Taylor Swift on Lover, which was more light surprise and bemusement that the very airy production paid off. Whereas this is kind of clunky and louder after the spare acoustics with the oddly integrated synths and that pedal steel tone that doesn't quite fit as well as it should. The song doesn't really sound that indifferent. It wants to sound like she wants a huge sing-along to convince everyone she doesn't really care, guys, and that makes it a little less credible. I don't know, I've yet to be seriously won over by a big Megan Moroney standout. At least right now, I don't think this is it. Number 86, PJ by Bossman Dlow and Lil Baby.
Service, I'm on a PJ shooting dice. Went from $50 to my name to $50K a night. You wanna fuck with a big Zod, baby? You can't be scared of heights.
Look, this wasn't a collaboration I was seeking out, but it also doesn't surprise me. Bossman Dlow's had a decent enough year. Lil Baby needs enough proper traction away from Central Cee. It makes sense. And honestly, Lil Baby might be the best thing about this song. His flow is on point and reasonably well balanced, even if the content is just more shallow flexing and brand name porn than anything else. I mean, it's not saying Bossman Dlow has anything to say here either. He doesn't, but he's also relying more on swagger and personality way more than technical competency, and when the hook feels oddly clumsy, I'm less on board with it. Coupled with the bass clipping the mix around the drippy trap beat, and just how much the fluttery piano melody is stuck at the back of the mix, well, I kinda get why I have not heard all that much about this collab. Just not a lot to say. Also not very good. Number 63, Woman's World by Katy Perry. Whereas with this, I've heard entirely too much, and where I'm going to start with a contentious observation that at this point of her career, I think Katy Perry thinks that she needs Dr. Luke in order to succeed. Ditching him since Witness has been a train wreck for her career. Why not play towards the feminist empowerment template? It's not like folks care that much for producers behind the scenes, and look, Dr. Luke has backed a lot of big singles from artists who really should know better the past couple of years, but does the general public care? But what tends to not get the same attention is that the majority of those songs he was on, they suck. Because Dr. Luke's producing and writing cachet has fallen off dramatically. So if the music isn't good and the music video is worse, that sort of dislike ratio does not happen for mainstream pop hits, that's telling. And yet you're trying to make a woman empowerment song with Dr. Luke, the pop stands are gonna double down ripping into your hypocrisy, especially if someone like Kesha was just so happened to coincidentally go viral with her new single independently around the same time. Look, I don't even like Joyride that much. The production delivery just had an odd note for me, it happens. But Woman's World strikes a weird note, mostly because it's just not much of anything. I actually think the synth bass groove against the fuzzy drum machines and the light new disco relic, it's fine, and Katy Perry's at least trying to commit as the limited singer she is, even if the lyrics are the definition of undercooked and generic. But the larger question I have with this is tone, specifically whether or not it's trying for satire. I've seen the defense that at least the first part of the video is, although the highly exaggerated second half would fall in similar parodic territory, and that's not even getting into Trisha Paytas's inclusion and what level of irony are we even operating on here. And if you're looking to satirize millennial pop feminism, aka songs you clearly liked making a decade ago that were tangible hits, it doesn't seem like there's a clear point being made with the satire. With the uncharitable view of it, alongside working with Dr. Luke, it's pretty ugly. Honestly self-defeating. I think the bigger issue is that the song itself is very plainly earnest, and the video comes across as more goofy and derivative and overdone than satirical. A label I think is just getting thrown around because the song is tanking and Katy Perry's management don't want to acknowledge that this might be part 2 of Jewel's intuition in video satire, except substantially stupider. Look, the truly damning thing about Woman's World is how toothless and flimsy it is. It doesn't have the brains to make a point about shallow girl boss feminism, or the fortitude to call out real feminist issues in the modern day. In other words, it's an archetypal late period Katy Perry song. It's disposable mediocre fluff. You can skip it. Number 62, Did It First by Ice Spice and Central Cee.
I don't care, cause he did it first. If he's cheating, I'm doing him worse. I ain't tripping up. I ain't tripping the grip in my purse. I don't care, cause he did it first.
Okay, for a while now, I have been less negative on Ice Spice than most. Not that I think she's particularly good, but rather the underlying knowledge that her limited skill set's gonna be the biggest inhibitor to any staying power. So this was just gonna be a matter of time, especially as the buzz around that upcoming album has been dubious at best. So okay, pair her with Central Cee and his American promo and all manner of behind the scenes relationship drama of which I don't remotely care about, and we get, well, a song that relies on you caring about that shit to some extent, because it's about the two of them in various states of infidelity. If it was just Ice Spice cheating back on her partner after he cheated on her, I might understand. But then Central Cee openly references a rumor that he started that he was dating Ice Spice when he was with someone else, where he spends the second half of his verse trying to detail how he gets away with it, mostly through bad excuses where he's clearly not stopping his cheating. And this is where you got the problem when you get the combination of non-personality with obnoxious personality in your duo. I just won't care about any relationship dynamic between them. And it's not even interesting drama, it's just social media nonsense. I mean, it's kind of a shame that the Jersey Club production is mostly decent with the chopped up faded vocal sample and the gunshot effects that pepper the verse. But when your song can't even run 2 minutes and the interplay is non-existent, yeah, I'm sorry, not good. Skip it. Number 59, Road Rage by Eminem, Jointz, and Sly Pyper.
Road rage, road, and I'm speeding. Fuck that red light, I'm trying to get even.
It's rather telling that Eminem is still gonna wind up with the worst songs this week, and let's start off with the obvious example that not even the defenders of this project seem to like. Dr. Dre gives them a series of leaden squonks against a scratch that doesn't really do much of anything, before Jointz starts hollering on the hook, which doesn't feel well supported at all. And okay, as much as I will give Eminem some credit for trying to split apart the voices of Slim Shady and himself in order to differentiate their points of view, a song like this is the worst possible example of how phoned in the concept really is. Because midway through the second verse, you hear the punch in of the voices that are blurring together. You're not fooling anybody, especially when the vocal quality gets a lot jerkier as a whole before there's that last minute switch up and we have Eminem imitating Juvenile for no good reason. But now we get to the content, which on the first verse is a flat admission of just plain confusion around trans people that's later echoed in the fourth verse with wonky arguments you would have seen online a decade ago. While sandwiched in between, we got a rant about body positivity, which is loaded with about as many bad conservative arguments as they will come. Individual responsibility. They want to change society rather than personal accountability for how one looks and behaves. Just, you know what, or just own your own shit. Honestly, the last statement is probably the most consistent and revealing across the track. It's the whole, not my business, you own your business, but don't expect me to change or do anything to help, and that just ignores systemic factors in all of this. Now, what he's clearly trying to imply that it's all in road rage. He's not thinking deeply about this, it just happens, and no, the bored-sounding willful ignorance is what really disappoints me here, especially when it sounds like a lot of this is in your voice, not Slim Shady's. And as someone who right now is in the best shape of his life, but occasionally does struggle with weight and actually has some pretty complex opinions on body positivity that you're not gonna hear, shit that is so clearly phoned in to then say, well, that's the point, even if it's structured to get the wink of approval from the sensible folks, as they clearly said in Eminem's increasingly clunky rap. Yeah, you know what? This fucking sucks. Skip it. Number 45, Guilty Conscience 2 by Eminem.
Apple spoils the whole orchard. Used to read comic books to learn more words, cause deep down I'm a dork, just a core nerd.
Of course, now we got the pivot point on the album, and where we finally put the end to Slim Shady for good, where M basically echoes a lot of my observations of how the tired, boring, immature, bullying dipshit is worn out his welcome, despite being the thematic crutch in which Eminem has relied upon for decades in his art, and how that has led to tremendous success, or at least just as a coping mechanism to keep on going. And yeah, not pretty, as M will basically run through a lot of the tired rant to showcase it. Honestly, the first half of the song is really grating, and the dark operatic production only carries it so far. But what irks me is that there's no real social commentary being made with this. If you're gonna reference Eminem's earlier career and not bring that in where he did before, or add more to place it in the modern context of who uses and co-ops that rhetoric now, I mean, it feels like Slim Shady is more toothless and tired than ever. And that's not even considering the fact that, again, Eminem's done this before. My Darling hits way harder than this, but in a switch that I legit like, on that song, while that ends on a very dark note, this has a moment where a panicking Slim Shady references both Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine, who helped create all this, and where M puts the fuse to bed before the third metaphorical suicide, which of course he will then telegraph. And thus, while I like this, again, I've heard him do it before. I get why Paul hangs up on him. I'm just not as impressed as I would like to be. And speaking of which, number 21, Fuel by Eminem and Jid.
Powers in a tongue, but it probably ain't powerful as a gun. All of you little cowards get devoured. I'm giving out flowers to anyone. I ain't been out the house in a minute, cause I ain't with it if the money is miniature.
Listening to Jid on this project reminds me a little of when Joyner Lucas showed up on Lucky You from Kamikaze. It's a sign that M recognizes a modern name that he should rap alongside and maybe even face a challenge. And while I don't think Jid's gonna have the steep decline that Joyner did, knock on wood, it does say something that he's on a track from the first half of a very conceptually structured album where Slim Shady is more in control. Now, thankfully, Jid stays away from all of that against the bassy scratch and yelping sample, as his verse is more focused on street-level violence and persisting with some pretty outrageous wordplay. Whereas M, okay, you know what, I'll give him credit. The rhyming structure is actually really good, and the veiled shots at Puff Daddy, they were rather welcome, even if the spelling gimmick is absolutely painful. And then you get the Kyle Rittenhouse bars, where honestly, outside of the gun reference, I don't even know what kind of point he was trying to make, except that Kyle Rittenhouse himself tried to correct M's gun knowledge, pussy-ass proto-fascist that he is. But then I hear all the multisyllabic rhyming. Just the most I get out of it is a violent flex that's loaded down with gun references without much of a punchline or deeper point, whereas Jid actually sets atmosphere in the world in which he lives. That adds texture, it adds more to say. I respect the technical competency, and yeah, the flows are good. It's probably the most consistent song on the album, but I don't know, when you pack in this many shots, I think more of them should land. Number 20, Renaissance by Eminem.
Spinning his hand like Edward Scissorhands, just likes competition and just goes about his business. Anyone who knows about his shindig, shenanigans, and all his wacky antics in the papers. Shady's dangling, a baby tangled in a blanket, strangling him, hanging him over the railing by the ankles on some gangster shit. Child endangerment, dark brain arcane, but it Mark Twain spinning it.
Ah yes, the album opener, which is a single extended verse against thunderstorm sounds, bells, dark piano, and the vocal pickup that reminds me a lot of the more competent songs on Encore. And of course, Eminem then squanders a pretty solid set of setup bars with a bunch of complaints about modern rap critics. Now, I can say a lot about hip-hop discourse in 2024, especially on social media, been hot garbage. Everything around the Drake and Kendrick Lamar beef screams to mind, and you can tell that M is just annoyed with the bad faith nitpicking and the disingenuous criticism. But the records and artists he references to make this point is a lot messier. Yes, the discourse around Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, it was bad, but Lil Wayne's had a bit of a career resurgence, and that collab album with 2 Chainz, it was just fine. Maybe don't put him on the same bar as Kanye West these days. And I get that Eminem wants to keep repping for Joyner Lucas, seemingly oblivious to all the corny shit he's really done since 2018. But hey, speaking of the devil, at least M is smart enough to recognize folks were making a parallel between the two. But if you are so deep in hip-hop culture, especially with diss records, you're seriously going to bat for J. Cole's Might Delete Later, an album I'm fairly certain J. Cole doesn't even like or endorse nowadays? But what's revealing here is that I think Eminem doesn't think the rap greats are given enough respect. He says that nerds would diss 36 Chambers, and no, with who you put in this section, the inconsistencies are noted. They don't get a free pass for their bullshit. I'm keeping the same energy. It's annoying because the rest of the song is otherwise fine, but you want to know what isn't? Finally, number 19, Habits by Eminem and White Gold.
Prescription, man. Goddamn, I miss you, Slim. You got an addiction, man. I know you can't get rid of me forever, cause you know that I'm prescription, man. Next time I'll be in your van.
It's not a good sign that after the first song on the album, we easily get the worst song on the album, so let's get any faint praise I have of this out of the way quickly. White Gold's hook, fine enough. He's got some texture and soul that doesn't feel supported in this twinkling, over-polished trap production, and him singing from the perspective of Eminem's addiction honestly kind of makes it a lot harder to swallow. I don't like the contrast. And I guess while I'm talking about the beat, the switch on the third verse into something a little bit more old school, cool enough, I guess. The rest of this track is dog shit, mostly because Eminem's flow is increasingly jerky and doesn't really lean into the Slim Shady voice at all. There's some traces of it in the flow, but if you're trying to play up that this is him taking over, it's not being done well. And hell, I was about done with the ableist slurs that hit on the first verse, although given how prevalently Gen Z throws around some of those words on social media these days, it's not just you, M, who deserve a thorough ass whooping for that cultural backwash, but it also kind of undercuts all the cancel culture whining that makes up the majority of this song, with so many lines referencing the people are gonna get so mad, and M, you want them to get mad. That's how you sold your records for years. You know that. You've said it yourself. Only this time you're reminiscing of the good old days of shitposting, conveniently left out why you did so. So here it just comes across as completely hollow. It's not funny, it's not witty or insightful, and juxtaposing South Park and Dave Chappelle alongside Colin Kaepernick, it's so fucking dishonest. The former two, they only seem to keep making money platforming reactionary horse manure, whereas Colin Kaepernick was blackballed by racist white team owners willfully misunderstanding a protest against police brutality that was suggested to him by a veteran. M, you should know that too. That's not getting into the flagrant transphobia, then the framing of assaults on trans women being faked for not getting enough attention in order to spark Me Too allegations and clout chasing, framing everyone complaining as white wine moms who neglect their own kids and have money, which, since he does look after his kids who have then prospered, you obviously could recognize Saul as a tongue-in-cheek joke, alongside shots at little people and faking confusion at pronouns and what words are okay. As if you're not a white guy in hip-hop for decades, known to be meticulous to a science about language, you know exactly what word would get you canceled just like DaBaby for real. real, M. It starts with an N. Now, the argument will be that all this is Slim intentionally saying this is the bad habit brought on by the drugs. It's supposed to be excruciating on purpose to bait this reaction out of me. Hey, Stans, it's not hard to understand. He's been doing this for decades. I'm not stupid. So I am disgusted how low effort it is. With the same edgelord whining I was tired of online a decade ago. Seemingly ignorant of the audience that a microcosm is gonna use it all unironically. Because your artifice is too half-assed to sell the satire. I mean, I'm not sure it's Eminem's worst song. Fack alongside chunks of Revival and Kamikaze are really hard to beat. But I find it his most dishonest. And honestly, pathetic. Marshall, you're over 50. I'd say you're better than it, but it's been a long-ass time since I remember when. And yeah, obvious, worst song of the week. Somehow not the worst song I've covered on Billboard Breakdown to my utter amazement just this year, but it's up there. Alongside Road Rage with Dem Jointz and Sly Pyper's dishonorable mention, whatever. Best of the week. My god, this week sucked. But M's getting it. I guess Fuel with Jid, mostly because I think it's got replay value. With Guilty Conscience 2 as honorable mention, it doesn't feel like it's got replay value, but it's the long overdue conclusion, I guess. Next week, goddamn fuck, I hope it's better than this. Stay tuned. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.